Welcome to part 2 of Midwest Kayak Angler's Yak Power install. Today we're going to cover the button lights, the LED strips, the power ports, the BerleyPro Orb, and some generic testing of the system. We're going to be drilling our holes using the drill bits that came with the kit. Makes it very simple. Kind of pick out where you're going to go. Make sure you have nothing behind that hole. That's going to be fairly important. You don't really need to, but I've been using goop on the threads just to give it a little bit more water soundness. We'll speed this up a bit so you can kind of see, get this whole thing together. Make sure that you do use both the hard washer and the rubber washer on the inside, boat side, to get you a nice seal here. Nice and fit. Move to the other side. Same kind of idea. Use the drill bit that came with the kit, drill it out, make sure you don't drill anything behind this particular wall. Same on this side. I'm just going to put on a little bit of a goop waterproof seal and before we put this in and thread it into the boat. I'm using a fiberglass basically to pull cables through a wall, but I'm using it here on the boat. Loosely fit. There's a whole lot of room under there. It's just I don't have long enough arms to feed this all the way through. Took it through to the middle cabin and then all the way up to the front so that we got our rear lights all up ready to be wired in the front cabin. Go ahead and start here on the front button lights. Same idea. I'd like to get this one fairly high so you don't get blinded by it at night, but you also need to be very careful because a lot of the contraptions for the skeg and the rudder and other things, that they all come through here. So you want to make sure that you do not get those either in your drill bit or drill into a place where you can't feed through your wires because you have too many apparatus behind that part of the wall. Little bit of goop and we're ready to tighten it up. Now we're up in the front of the boat. I have mine installed in the hatch. You can see from the first part of this show, I put kind of Velcroed this control relay up in the front. So right now I'm going to put on a Y splitter, and this will allow me to run all the lights off of one button. I don't know that I'll need this, but I figured I might as well. I don't think there'll be any time where I'll just want the fronts or just the rear lights on. So I'm going to go ahead and put them together. So whenever I put on number 2, I'll get both of my interior lights. Go ahead and install the battery back. Had it out of the way, but as you'll see, I'd like to put it on and then twist it a bit because otherwise the hatch will not fit inside the front here. The Hobie storage hatch will not fit in. We'll go ahead and power this up, connect the battery to our control module. Next, we need to run one of these control cable extensions up to the actual control panel in the hatch that I have in the center hatch. Go ahead and plug that in and run the wire up to our bucket that we have our control panel installed in. Here we have it installed. I'm also showing the remote control. This allows for the Bluetooth and remote control operation of all of these lights plus everything else I connect to this Yak Power System. Kind of slide the bucket back into its place and we're good to go with overall install of these button lights, our first part of this episode. Back in the shop, I'm prepping a charging port for the Hobie bucket. This will primarily charge the iPhone and spare GoPro batteries. Here we have the 4-foot charging port cable and the USB dongle that Yak Power uses. Not exactly thrilled with the vulnerable USB connection, but I figure it will work in the bucket. We'll need to drill a 3/4 inch hole to pass through the wire and for the actual power connector itself. Now that we have that done, I can run the cable through and do the simple 2-screw mounting required for this port. Here, Yak Power provides 2 self-tapping screws. Great when you're trying to screw it into the side of a boat, but a little bit more difficult when you're screwing it in a bucket, and they will be exposed as you take the bucket in and out of the Hobie. I'm actually going to take the Dremel to these screws to get rid of those sharp screws on the side of the bucket. The USB dongle is fairly self-explanatory. I'm just going to use some painter's tape to lay it out and try to get a visualization of what it's going to look like. I'm going to mount it kind of inside of where the button lights are that I installed earlier in this episode. Used a 1/2-inch drill bit to drill in there, and then I'm just going to kind of feed through the long cables. As you'll see, the kit comes with each cable, then it comes with an actual coupler of the 2 cables for front and the 2 cables for back. Then it actually comes with a Y cable for the front, so you can put them all on a single input of your 5-input system. I thought that was really nice. That came with the Y splitter. I actually bought a few others. I'll go ahead and put some goop on here. It is on the side of the boat, so I want to make sure we get this as airtight as possible. There is a washer, a rubber washer on there, but I figure goop can't hurt in this situation. So we'll put that on, and then we'll start to actually thread the receptacle. And this is what the LED strips plug into for their power. It's a nice system. It actually comes with an Allen wrench, so that you can connect directly to these LED light strips, the actual receptacle, and just kind of tighten it in there. It threads itself into the side of the boat, and you're pretty much good to go. You want to get this tight, but not too tight. You don't want the rubber gaskets to get overextended, as that will affect the overall seal. Go ahead and lay it out how I expect this to be, and then we want to prep the surface. We are going to be using the 3M tape that comes with the system, so I want to make sure it's clean. This has been in a ball of dirty water, so I'm going to clean it all up so we make sure we have a good connection and a nice solid stick of the LED strip. Getting the backing tape of the 3M off was a good 5-minute ordeal, just trying to get your fingernails under there and make sure this all comes off without pulling on the actual tape off of the LED strips. I'm going to push this one in. Push it in fairly hard, but it doesn't click or anything that I noticed. I've heard people saying it might click, but didn't do that. So I'm going to try to line this up and then just kind of slowly pull the backing tape off as I lay this down. Try to get this as level as possible so I don't have, kind of disjointed look on the side of my kayak. Alright, get it all stuck on there, and we should be good to go to move up to the front of the boat. Actually, I have one more screw to put in. I don't know that you necessarily have to do this, but I did notice that the plastic piece at the end kind of stands off from the boat a bit, so I figured the screw would make it at least look better. It will also, I guess, protect it if that 3M tape does come unsticked, but it seemed like it was pretty good on there, and I really didn't have a whole lot of concern. Put the tape back on, kind of got it as level as I possibly could, and got it to kind of run along the lines of the boat there. I'll use my 1/2-inch drill bit again and put out my hole for the receptacle for the LED strips. I kind of put it right in front of the essentially the Hobie's mounting ports on top of the boat. Just kind of put it right up there, and there's a recess there in the cabin, so you can kind of shove everything in behind the fishing pole holders, and you have a little bit of room to maneuver things around. Gonna go back to the goop, put some goop on there. Make sure we have a nice watertight connection here. Get it nice and level, and go back to our Allen wrench and tighten this up and put it on. Going back to the prep alcohol so I can clean up the side of the boat before we start trying to put this 3M sticker on the boat. Plug this in and look to see if we can take the tape off and go ahead and stick this onto my boat. Alright, let's move to some of the wiring. Kind of getting the cabling from the back of the boat up to the front for our pair of rear LED strips. I kind of use the same fiberglass post that I used on the previous video. I moved this up to the center of the boat so I can grab it and kind of force it all the way up to the front for wiring. It's you know, it's not very cumbersome. You know, if you have some way to force it through, this is what you use to kind of run cables and walls. I use it for that primarily, but it works pretty well on the boat. And we get it up here to the very front so we can actually wire everything up. Pretty simple, you know, when it really comes down to it. It's all plug and play. Like I said, in this one we have kind of the jacks that come up here and go into the doubler that come up here and come to the Y unit. And then the Y unit actually goes into a second Y unit to allow all of your LED strips to plug into a single port on your control panel. I think it's great that they include all of that. It allows you to put quite a bit on a 5-port control panel. Gonna go ahead and plug this in, get everybody connected for the rear, and then we'll go ahead and start doing our cleanup. We're gonna have a lot of cabling cleanup. There's a lot of cables that are much longer than really necessary. We'll go ahead and get this tightened up, and this is one of the control cables, just some excess up here at the front. Get it tightened up and all cleared up, and then we can finish up our cabling. The BerleyPro Orb is an interesting device. It mounts on your typical Railblazer E-port, so if you do happen to use those other places on your boat for powering devices, you can move it around, you can swap things out. It's actually really nice if you happen to be in that family. What we're going to do to mount this one is it's basically 3 holes, 2 for the screws that mount it and 1 for the wire pass-through. Pretty simple. I just kind of laid it out where I wanted it, where it was clear below, and where it was going to clear actually the Hobie power pole mount, because I plan to put one of those on soon. The idea was lay it out where I wanted it, make sure it was clear, drill it out, and then figure out where to put the actual hole for the wire pass-through. On the wire pass-through, what I did is I took a Sharpie and I just kind of heavily marked it up on that side, and then laid it out as a template on the actual Hobie to lay out a kind of a black circle on there of where I needed to be. I also did some measurements just to make sure that I was in the right location before drilling that out. Drilled it out, pretty simple. Took the pass through the cable to go down into the hole so I could pull it up to the front, and kind of went to the goop once again to fill in the holes on these to make sure that we are staying waterproof. Put the goop in, screw everything down. Then you need to go, inside of the hull and put in a washer and nut. And basically, I just use my screwdriver and a 10mm socket and tighten this all down so it's nice and secure. Once you get the cables in there, you have to pull them up to the front. And then you use one of the Yak Power plugs. What they do essentially is allow you to convert from bare wire to SAE. So kind of went through that process, put the heat shrink on, connected the wires, got everything nice and secure. And then I'm ready to go as far as being able to plug this in and getting it going. Now for some system testing. Really basic. We're going to try to use the app first, turn on LED strip, turn on the button light. With the app, everything's working perfectly. I actually have it wired properly. That's good to see. Kind of go to the remote next. I don't know how much I'll use the remote, but I'll definitely use the cell phone quite often. Everything's working as it should, and finally we need to go test out the BerleyPro Orb. I want to see how bright this is going to be, but also, it's a nice unit. I'm really impressed with it. But it is controllable by phone, by button inside the hatch, and by this little waterproof remote. Very happy with it. I have to say the Yak Power System was fairly easy to install, worked really well. I'm impressed. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like this or subscribe if you did, and we'll see you next time.